Hello. So I'm going to be working sort of really quickly through 133, talking about constraints. In any drawing, in any sketch, we can add constraints to basically give rules to that line or bunch of lines so that it has to stay that way. So I'm just changing this back to millimeters because that's kind of what the drawing's in. So for my students, I'm asking them to kind of read through, try out some things, but ultimately what we're trying to do is submit the image from question 27, and then we'll put our name on it. So as you go through the steps, it talks about what different constraints do, whoops, and kind of shows you some examples. So I'm going to run this real quick. What I will recommend is if I'm looking at the dimensions for 27, it says at the bottom is 100. So if I go across here, I can see the approximate dimension. Now it doesn't have to be perfect. Some of my students have been trying to like get it perfect and they say it's good enough. But I'll sort of get this bottom one like that and I'll show you why that's a problem in a minute. But it's roughly like this, down, over, back in. Now in terms of rough shape, that's kind of what it looks like. Now the problem is with, so that was a right click, I'll just say okay. With getting things where they're supposed to be by the dimension that you just put, is that can be changed, that can be moved. So if I give it a new rule or I try to move one line, it's going to warp around. So dimensions are one type of constraint. Tap escape a couple of times if you're ever on a button you don't want to be in. So yeah, so if that gets moved, then it's going to warp. So I can go through and add the dimensions that I'm given because that's one constraint, that's one thing that I know should be a certain size. And so I'm just going from the drawing that I was given there on the worksheet or on the website. So those are, and then there's circles in the middle. You can play with those later. Oh wait, no, there's a diameter on one of them. Doop-a-doop. It's 5. Okay. So these dimensions will prevent me from doing, whoops, I hit escape. They will prevent me from doing certain things like moving this line away. I can move it back and forth because it's not, there's nothing telling it to be in a certain spot. So one thing I can do for these constraints, so these ones popped in automatically, but if you click on constraints and that's what's highlighted, I can hit delete on the keyboard and they'll go away. So that would let me adjust things. However, I do want those to be perpendicular. If you don't know what a constraint does, you can always hit the drop down here and it will tell you what it is. Or up here, if you hover, it'll tell you what that constraint is as well. So looking at the diagram and reading through the directions, they give you a bunch of rules for the pieces, like that has to be equal to that. We know this and this are equal, and that's gonna, whoop, that did not quite do what I wanted it. Equal and parallel are not necessarily the same function. Now you see I like lost that line, but it just got really small because it's still following the rules. And I can move it in and tell it kind of can manipulate it. So we know we're going to be, I would say, done when these are pretty locked in place. I usually just hit escape if I don't like how something's going. All right, those are locked. Over constrained, so that one's fine. Let me tell these two sides to be equal. Well, that's funky. All right, what else can we do? Oh, these two up here are supposed to be equal. These two are already told to be equal. One of the ones that I so we can do a line. I use this a bunch. Let's find the center on both of those. You can use a construction line. I just use a regular line a lot of times. So I give it the law to be vertical, and that's going to force these two center points to line up. So now I can sort of move or try to move lines around, and currently I believe there's no line that I can move. These circles can still be moved. So looking at the directions, the way they have it anyways, here actually delete this circle. So this circle is the right size. They have a line from the middle here. Oops, hit escape. It looks like they have this circle. This is tangent to this line. And then they have it vertical with that point. So that'll lock it there. Now to get the one on the other side, we can mirror. And some of this is fiddling around. Whoops. Oh, this actually brings up a good point. If you do leave a sketch, you do need to go back into the sketch you were working on. So you really should only see one sketch for this assignment. If you see two, you're possibly working in multiple sketches, and that's not going to work. So just like with a lot of the other functions, I'll select the object, I'll select a axis of rotation, and I can just say OK, and then I'll just keep that as a mirrored function. For my students, I'm asking you to just add your name somewhere down here, and that way you can screenshot your finished work with your name, and that will work. You know this is all going to be fine if you try to drag stuff around and nothing moves. There's a few different ways to get this to work. Certain constraints can work rather than others, but for the most part you'll have all these constraints. And if you have any questions, I will try to help, but that's kind of the quick run through for this assignment. You do need to submit it so that you can see the sketch. Anyways, thank you.